Why is the curtain blue? That is the question that destroyed civilization. Am I being hyperbolic? Maybe. But only a little, because we've all seen that meme. And if you haven't, let me give you a little refresher. Students in a class are asked why the author chose to make the curtains blue. Their interpretations range from symbolizing depression to foreshadowing and everything in between, but eventually the teacher says, because the author's favourite colour is blue. Sometimes it's the teacher interpreting the art and the author themselves saying it's their favourite colour. There are many riffs on the idea, and different versions of it float around the internet like that garbage island in the Atlantic Ocean. It was hard to find the origin because it seems to have been deleted, but Urban Dictionary seems to think it comes from a not always right story, and I've tried reverse image searching and trying to look at the most common usage of the words, but Google's search function is broken and bad now, which is actually a point I'm going to get to later, so let's put a pin in that. Urban Dictionary defines blue curtains as the act of finding literary symbolism where there is none. And I'm sure, in a number of cases, that this is accurately applied. As a writer myself, I can't always justify the decisions I make about characters' outfits or pieces of furniture. Sometimes you just point out specifics for the sake of colouring the story with something interesting. Not everything has to have some kind of secret meaning. However, the main problem with this blue curtains philosophy is that it's bred a kind of willful ignorance that is going to cause the actual downfall of society, and not in the good society has fundamental problems and we need to start over way, more in the total collapse of anything worth fighting for way. Dennis Jers attempted to fix the most popular version of this meme in 2018 with a better take on what literary analysis is actually for, where it used to say, what the teacher thinks, the curtains represent his immense depression and his lack of will to carry on, versus, the curtains were fucking blue. Now it reads, in English class you learn the single official correct opinion about what the poem means so you can spit it back out later for points. Versus, if we use evidence and empathy to enlighten each other and resolve our disputes, we can build a better world. Shall we begin? What does this poem do? And while I do think this is an overly optimistic assumption of teaching, it's definitely more accurate than deciding that every single writer only ever means the curtains are fucking blue. But even then, the comments on his blog entry are indicative of the larger cultural shift towards the deliberate extruding of knowledge. The top comment reads,
Bull twaddle. The curtains are blue meme is demonstrating the postmodernist reinterpretive garbage the average English class is made up of today. People who interject their own bullshit into a text to try to interpret it in such a fashion that a sign that says "Stop, no trespassing beyond this point" becomes a political statement about the fall of the 1920s era Tsarist autocracy and how it relates to the transgender struggle in New Zealand on a Tuesday in winter by people who think the best flavour ice cream is Rocky Road. The average limited mind of someone whose career is English teacher because they fail to achieve any success becoming a writer themselves and desperately want to be seen as insightful when in reality they're kinda mediocre. I don't feel that way about teachers. Teachers are good.
And Matthew, listen. We've all sat through at least one English class where we're convinced the teacher is talking out of their arse, but that doesn't mean we have to apply that feeling to the concept of English teachers as a whole. The postmodernist reinterpretive garbage the average English class is made up of today is actually incredibly beneficial to people. The point of the question, why are the curtains blue, is rarely to come to an actual conclusion, but to teach students how to interpret art, how to critique and investigate and come to their own opinions about what the story is trying to say. A student is just as correct saying they're blue because the character is depressed as they would be saying they're blue because the author likes blue. Both might be true, neither might be true. The point is to pose a thesis and then examine it. This is what all literary and media criticism should be. Examining your interpretation against popular interpretations, or even what the author says about their own work, and trying to decide if the author was successful or if the other interpretations work better, and if they do, why? Now, this video isn't about blue curtains. I have another video planned to discuss more about this particular genre of stupidity, which should hopefully coincide with the release of a video on media literacy by Zoe B, so keep an eye out for both of those. The reason I bring up blue curtains is because it's indicative of a larger cultural shift towards willful ignorance and an inability to absorb and retain new or conflicting information. This video is about how everybody is stupid now, and how not to be.
Will not accept that it's a highly dangerous road.
Dude, relax. It's not that deep. It's not that deep.
Making you watch grass grow for 4 hours is simply the most thought-provoking experience I've ever been a part of.
I could say I like watching movies with my friends, and someone in the comment section will be like, oh, so you don't like blind people then? What? There was a lot of confusion.
The pinnacle of that extraordinary lie.
Like, why can't we just have like a little thing at the beginning that just like tells us just a little something, so I know
He's already president. That guy, he's our president. Remember when pride was a sin?
Enough with the woke.
Let's start with the basics. What is learning? The dictionary defines it as the acquisition of knowledge or skills through study, experience, or being taught. That makes sense, right? Well, I put out a survey to see how people generally interpret that question, and the answers were very interesting. First, I surveyed my YouTuber friends, ones who mostly make video essays, and you might be saying, tell us. That's far too small of a survey pool. Your results will be skewed from that sample. And if you are, congratulations, that's critical thought. I also had that thought, so then I made the survey public and tried to get people to share it around as much as possible. But tell us, there's no guarantee that that's an unbiased sample, especially if it's being shared around the audiences of those YouTubers. Surely they all think similarly too. And you're right! A+ for you! Which is why I called up my physicist friend and asked her to share it among her colleagues, and my high school friends who all went into different career paths. Does this in any way make it a perfect scientific study? No! And we'll get into that particular part of this later because I had to devote a whole section to it. But specifically, in response to the question, what is learning? I got some interesting answers. Overwhelmingly, people said things along the lines of acquiring skills, gaining knowledge, receiving new information, becoming aware of things, which is all in line with the definition. Some people were more specific. Retention of information to keep the brain active. Pretty good. Understanding the thing and doing the thing, and a lot of subconscious things during the understanding and doing. I like that one. Building and refining a vast network of associative brain things towards one topic over time. Very scientific analysis. Learning is growing and is the reason why we evolve. An excellent point. There are loads of really interesting responses, and hopefully by the time this video goes up, I will have found a way to release them anonymously in case anybody wants to peruse them. There were even answers I didn't fully agree with, like going to the hardware store to hoard tools you might need later but probably won't. Because it implies that most learning isn't useful, and that's something I fundamentally disagree with. Learning isn't hoarding. It's not a finite resource to claim. It's a process. If we're keeping with that analogy, it'd be more like learning how to use a hammer. Learning how to use a knife without cutting myself. You know, the basics. It's not necessarily hoarding the tools, it's learning how to use the tool. Anyway, point is, my favourite response was the process of understanding and retaining new information successfully, because it highlights that you don't just get shown the new information. In order to learn, you must also understand it and retain it successfully. If you half memorize a piece of information you picked up somewhere, that's not learning. That's just retention. I also liked obtaining information in order to carry out a task or develop a new skill, and being able to apply it at a later date outside of the initial instructive event, because it's a great elaboration on that idea. Learning isn't simply memorization, it's the ability to take the information you've received and use it in the future, even outside of the original context in which it was taught to you. So, we've got a grasp on the basic concept of learning. Now how about intelligence? Before you get bored and click off, here's my boobs! Seriously, I promise I'll get to the part where I call everybody stupid in a minute. Just bear with me while we define some of these terms. I promise you, I'm saving you from all the weeks of boring research that I did, trawling through scientific studies and research papers and academia in order to present all that information to you in a much more palatable way. Don't get me wrong, I love boring research, but I assume most people don't. And if you do, there are sources in the description. Anyway. Dictionary says intelligence is having good understanding or a high mental capacity, quick to comprehend, characterized by quickness of understanding, sound thought, or good judgment. That makes sense to me. I like to think I'm pretty smart, and apparently so do most people, because the survey showed roughly 83% of people considered themselves intelligent. Only around 17% of people said they didn't. So I asked why they thought they were intelligent, or otherwise, and the responses were fascinating. The obvious came up: grades and academic success, critical thinking, praise from outside sources, picking up skills or knowledge quickly, retaining large amounts of information, that kind of thing. Excuse me while I eat a Jaffa cake while I talk about this. I'm very hungry. It was interesting to see how many people took the question, what do you base this intelligence on, as, why are you smarter than other people? Because it's absolutely a reading of the question that's accurate, but it's interesting that we have to frame intelligence as something that puts us in competition with others. In a way, all skills are like that. Athletic ability, artistic ability, cooking ability. You base your rating of your skills on the evidence of other people's abilities. I'm a better cook than most of my friends, but I'm not as good as a professional chef, so I say I'm a pretty good cook. Maybe if I were friends with more chefs, I'd consider my skills less impressive and I'd say I'm a mediocre cook. I'm a worse long-distance runner than most people I know, but I can walk up a flight of stairs without losing my breath too badly, so I'm not entirely unable. I'd call my athletic ability slightly below average. But if I only hung out around other people who never ever exercise and are completely out of shape, I might call myself pretty fit. I'm a good singer, but only because I'm told I am. I'm a good writer, but only because all my grades tell me so.
Asking the question wasn't about finding people who are provably smart. It was there more to make you think about why you think you're intelligent, rather than for you to prove it one way or another. I'm sure we all know stupid people who claim to be smart. And we all know intelligent people who think they're stupid. A study on self-assessment of knowledge stated as such.
Basic psychological research suggests that the correlation between self-assessed knowledge and test performance may be low, because some learners are inaccurate. Across multiple domains, Kruger and Dunning demonstrated that less competent individuals inflated their self-assessments more than highly competent individuals. Participants performing the bottom quartile on measure of humor, logical reasoning, and English grammar consistently rated themselves above average. These less competent individuals also failed to accurately assess the competence of others. Thus, although the relationship between self-assessment and actual performance was generally positive, self-assessments were a weak and imperfect indicator of actual performance. In terms of instructional design, research suggests that self-assessments of knowledge have a critical role in the learning process and that learners benefit from having an accurate understanding of their knowledge levels. Specifically, in order for learners to build lifelong learning habits, they must be able to critically evaluate their own knowledge and skill levels.
Intelligence, in a way, is a metric of superiority, and it shouldn't be. Did you want to take me less seriously when I was talking while eating? Did you want to take me more seriously after I put mascara on? These are all unconscious biases we carry with us all the time, and they shouldn't hold any bearing on whether we think of people as intelligent. But they do. Intelligence, like those skills, can be learned. Now, this isn't to say that everybody is capable of becoming Einstein, and it's also not to say that some people don't have some kind of biological advantage. I could do cardio and long-distance training every day for the rest of my life, and I still wouldn't achieve the running prowess of Usain Bolt. I can take art classes and practice for 8 hours a day, but that doesn't mean I'll be the next Da Vinci. But I will improve. I'll be able to run for longer without stopping. I'll draw better than I did 2 years ago. I'll become more discerning. I really liked one answer that said they believed they were intelligent because of their ability to continue learning and the speed at which I pick things up. I think intelligence means a lot of things, and I'm pretty good at most of them. Book smarts, logic and spatial matters, emotional awareness, etc. But really, I think intellectual curiosity and flexibility has more to do with societal perception. I would agree. Like, I'm intelligent, right? I think so, my teachers thought so, I assume you think so, at least a tiny bit because you clicked on this video. I graduated high school, did a joint honours degree in professional writing and screenwriting. I did a summer program online at Busan University learning Korean. I did a tutoring PGCE. I love learning in the same way bodybuilders love lifting weights or insecure men love talking about how women would like you more if you were hotter. I'm knowledge maxing. I've always had a knack for English. Speaking, writing, critiquing. I was, and still am, stellar at essays. I was on the debate team at school, I was speech captain and arts captain, which is essentially being the representation of both arts and humanities in my year. I don't tell you all this to prove my superiority in the realm of academia and learning, I do it to explain where and how I learned to learn, and to give some insight into why I might be perceived as intelligent. Because I'm good at English, I sound smart. I'm very, very good at putting words in a row in a way that engages most people. I know a lot of big words, I spend a large amount of my time researching topics I'm interested in, and writing about politics and society, and I took drama in high school and did a lot of public speaking even outside of that, which means I'm generally very well spoken in most situations. Do I know how to fix my car if it breaks down? No. Have I even once successfully baked a cake without the middle sinking in or it somehow coming out wrong? No. Can I solve any kind of complex mathematical problem without help? No. I remember scientific and mathematical formulas, but I couldn't tell you how to apply them in most situations. I accurately use a lot of long words, but if you asked me to sit down and define those words, I'd probably struggle, even though I'm using them correctly. I had to Google extruding just to make sure that joke worked earlier, even though I was right. I'm terrible at most sciences, I struggle to take in legal jargon, and if you tried to teach me anything about coding, I become what essentially amounts to a rock, just incapable of retaining information, an inanimate object that cannot make coherent thought. Unless it has googly eyes on it. Intelligence is so much about perception, and I am intelligent, but I have been in situations where people assume I'm more intelligent than the person next to me, simply because I'm more well-spoken, even when the person next to me is an engineer or an IT specialist or a physicist, which is why I'm best suited to making videos like this. I can take complex subjects that have been explained to me or researched by much smarter people, and I can make them palatable to a wider audience, which is an incredibly useful skill, especially in a world where people seem to not want to learn anymore. Because I don't know about you, but it seems to me like everybody is getting dumber. I say seems because I don't believe human beings are collectively losing the ability to be intelligent, but it does feel like every day I wake up and hear the most brain-dead take I've ever heard in my life, and then the next day I wake up and a newer, worse thought is being expressed to rousing applause, either on the internet or in person. Obviously, the internet makes it worse. The aggregation of every single category of person, all with the same access to what essentially amounts to a town crier's megaphone, means that opinions we would never have had to hear before are directly in front of us, begging to be interacted with. People have been able to confidently speak on subjects they have no knowledge of in the privacy of their own homes since the dawn of time. But now, we've created a world where those opinions are expressed publicly, and it makes you feel like we're getting stupider, when actually, the stupid people are getting louder.
And what is stupidity, anyway? Because it's not just ignorance. We're all ignorant. There are millions of topics I have zero knowledge on because the human brain, devastatingly, just doesn't have the capacity to hold all possible knowledge. I can't tell you anything about most countries' political history. I don't know anything about chemistry outside of the basics, and that's not because I'm stupid, it's because I'm just ignorant about those things. As Michael J. Zimmerman takes great pains to point out in his academic ruminations on the concept of responsibility and ignorance alone cannot be to blame for a bad person's behavior.
There has been much discussion recently of such moral vices as racism, sexism, and the like. I would think that it frequently, but by no means necessarily, happens that people who manifest these vices are oblivious to the wrongness involved in their doing so. This is an unwelcome conclusion to many. Several recent articles urge that we acknowledge that people are frequently to blame for engaging in such behavior, even though they engage in it in ignorance. They've taken pains to show how it is that, contrary to the assertions of many, such vices and the consequent behavior are often in the agent's control. Some have emphasized, too, that the agent is often aware how to exercise this control. Some have emphasized how it is that the agent can often control whether he or she remains ignorant of the wrongness of engaging in such vicious behavior. But we can grant, indeed I think we should grant, that all this is true, without granting that the agent is responsible either for the vices in question or for the consequent vicious behavior. For lack of ignorance concerning wrongdoing is a root requirement of responsibility. One can have control over one's vicious behavior, one can have control over one's vices, one can be aware that one has such control, and one can have control over whether one remains ignorant of the associated wrongness without actually being aware of the associated wrongness. And absent such awareness, one is not responsible. Let me end by noting that even if in many cases people are not culpable, for example, their racism, their racist views, and their racist behavior, this of course does not mean that there is nothing to be criticized morally in such cases. Racism is a moral vice, regardless of whether one is morally responsible for it. Having racist views is morally reprehensible, and acting on them is morally wrong. Ascriptions of responsibility constitute only one of several ways to engage in moral evaluation.
Ignorance alone isn't a bad thing. Pulling an example out of thin air, I watch a YouTube channel called The Hoof GP that carves cow hooves. That's literally it, that's all of their videos, is taking care of cows, specifically their feet. Society has an innate desire to look down on people like that. Farmers, customer service workers, plumbers, cleaners, as though their lack of a job that requires a fancy degree means they must be less intelligent. But listen to The Hoof GP talk for 5 minutes and it's clear that he's incredibly intelligent.
The pus has basically granulated and turned into new flesh and tissue, which in turn has also calcified the bone inside her foot. So even if we could fix the problem, we cannot fix the symptom.
He's an expert on this subject. He's incredibly well spoken, but there are some people who would take a single clip of him fumbling a sentence and use that to justify why they're allowed to look down on him.
That is the best way to get her foot off this part of her foot. No, that's the best way to get her weight off this part of her foot.
I worked in customer service for 10 years. I've been a cleaner for the last year, and I can confidently tell you that I've met so many more intelligent, insightful people working those unskilled jobs, which is a total lie, by the way, there's no such thing as unskilled labor, so jot that down, than I have in academia. A degree doesn't make you intelligent, it just means you're good at one field of study. And sometimes it doesn't even mean that. I know people with PhDs who are morons, and I know people who didn't graduate high school who are brilliant. Academia is an old way of measuring worth, and it's becoming increasingly outdated, especially in a world where we can see the toll that labor takes on people. And we were shown that society would grind to a halt without service workers during lockdowns. You really want to call the person that's enabling you to buy groceries an idiot? Just because of some weird prejudice you're holding on to? I sure don't. And if you think they are, you should probably examine your unconscious biases. Studies are repeatedly showing that the human capacity for intelligence is growing, not shrinking. So why do we think people are stupider now? Is it just because stupid people are more visible? Or is it something more granular than that? It's a combination of things. But the most important thing it boils down to is that stupidity is a choice.
Willful ignorance is the problem. That's what really makes a stupid person. A refusal to engage with new or contradictory information. You can be unknowledgeable and not be stupid, provided you're not being deliberately obtuse. Stupidity isn't a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of curiosity. Which means that I can very confidently say that people are getting stupider. Just look at literally any social media site. Scroll at random for 5 minutes and you will find the most unhinged discourse about something completely banal, where people are doing the verbal equivalent of shitting in their hands and throwing it at each other, all for the sake of winning an argument that will end in all of them covered in shit, regardless of the victor. Tiffany Ferg has a great video on learned helplessness where she talks about how a generation of people don't know how to actually use computers because they've been raised on mobile devices and only know how to operate apps.
It makes sense that kids who are raised on touchscreens and super user-friendly things like iPhones, tablets, they learn how to use apps, but they don't know how to use like a PC or a desktop. A lot of kids have never used a physical mouse before. They're only familiar with touchpads. So they can do most of the things they need to on their phone or on an iPad, but if they had to do something that requires an actual computer, they're going to struggle with that.
Kids don't even know how to type properly. A lot of them don't know how to search or use search engines. They don't know how to use the internet. They only know how to use apps.
In my experience as a young millennial, I remember actively learning and practicing new technologies. We took typing tests in the library. We had like computer classes to teach us basic skills like Microsoft Word and Excel. Anyway, most of us ended up being labeled as good with tech because we just spent a lot of time figuring it out.
That's a real tangible problem, and it doesn't make those people stupid, they're just ignorant because they haven't been taught how to use the other devices. Where they become stupid is when they start looking down on older people for not knowing how to use apps, as if those things aren't exactly the same ignorance in opposite directions. Refusing to learn how to use a computer, even if it's hard or frustrating because it's not what you're used to, is where you become stupid. And I'm not saying that everybody is capable of learning how to use a computer. It's perfectly fine if you don't. I'm just saying, those in glass houses, it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that media literacy is at an all-time low, but it's definitely getting worse, and our media isn't helping. I have so much to talk about regarding this specific issue that I'm making a whole separate video about it, but allow me a small soapbox in the meantime. Shows like the live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender and Percy Jackson and the Olympians are just the most recent and obvious in a trend of shows being made by production companies' desire to spoon-feed their audience instead of letting the story breathe enough to speak for itself. They beat you over the head with exposition so aggressively that it feels like doing a writing workshop in the first year of your writing degree and having to hear somebody's script that has seen no drafts and clearly thinks the best way to tell a story is to literally have the characters essentially turn to camera and say it. If you're looking for that kind of storytelling, may I suggest to you music. The rise of anti-intellectualism as a point of pride for people is especially bad on Twitter and TikTok. Is anybody surprised? But every week that somebody sees something and decides to hate it without ever watching it or engaging with it because of some arbitrary reason they've made up that gets projected to millions of people, I envy the dead! The fact that every single Reddit post now has at least one comment on it claiming the story must be fake if it's even a little bit dramatic, because people would rather enjoy the superiority of spotting a fake story than empathizing with somebody who might be going through something horrific, like dramatic things aren't happening to people every single day. Fake stories exist on Reddit, but this trend of not letting any post go by without accusing it of lying is starting to get more annoying than the liars, and it's definitely more harmful to ingrain a constant distrust of people's experiences than it is for somebody to make things up for Reddit karma. Every single time somebody makes a joke about actors naming their favorite movies and picking obscure art house films or foreign movies or even just old movies, a fairy loses its wings.
My top 3 movies of all time? Wow. You might not like my answers. As a film student myself, a connoisseur of the industry, I can't help but feel that I have a much higher level of comprehension when it comes to film than the average American. So forgive me if I don't tell you the latest Marvel movie or Legally Blonde. No, I think that I bring much more insight to this discussion than that.
You did this. Actors should be watching more movies than you. They're studying their craft. You wouldn't go up to somebody who worked at a coffee shop who was trying coffee elsewhere and smack the cup out of their hands for being pretentious, would you? Don't answer that. I don't actually know how many of you I trust to know the right answer anymore. The most blatant example is probably Austin Butler saying one of his favourite movies is The Good, the Bad and the Ugly because he used to watch it with his grandpa as a kid, and then a bunch of, embarrassingly, Gen Z people jumping all over themselves to call that elitist, as if that movie isn't one of the most unpretentious, extremely straightforward action films of all time.
Favorite movie as a kid? I love The Good, the Bad and the Ugly.
Alright, as a kid.
Just say Toy Story or something, it's okay.
I have yet to meet a man over 25 who has not, at some point, sat and watched that movie with their father or grandfather. Y'all are woefully misusing the word pretentious. It's not pretentious to have seen that movie. You're being pretentious by implying that people who like old or foreign or art house movies think they're pretentious. Because you clearly think you're better than those people for not enjoying those things. Pretension is, and I'm pulling out the definitions here, trying to appear or sound more important or clever than you are, especially in matters of art and literature. So, by mocking directors for enjoying French art house or Japanese dramas or Chinese action as pretentious, you're exposing yourself as trying to sound cleverer than you are. Those people aren't being pretentious because they actually do know more than you. Sure, some of them might exaggerate to sound more knowledgeable about their craft, but if they are, who cares? It's not hurting anybody to be exposed to more foreign cinema or interesting genres of film and television you might not have seen before. And I'm not even going to get into the idea that watching foreign media in any way makes you pretentious, as if every single other culture doesn't have equally interesting ideas as America or England. That's extremely xenophobic, whether you intend it that way or not. Writing off entire countries' worth of content because of subtitles or years' worth of cinema because they're in black and white is one of the most ignorant things you can do. You're allowed to not watch those movies. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you get to look down on people who do to make yourself feel better about being less worldly than them. It's fine if you struggle with subtitles as well. If you're literally not able to watch foreign films, that's okay. That doesn't exempt you from not being a dick about it. The Poor Things discourse alone makes me weep for the future. A movie that was made specifically to critique the way men behave around women and the way young women grow up sexualized, and you can argue how successful it was until the cows come home, but instead of that, people are just pointing at it and going, ew, disgusting, the pedo movie, how dare you support that? As if having the ew response to the things that happen in that movie aren't 100% intentional. As Comrade Chris put it on Twitter, the entire Poor Things conversation is just proof that people cannot handle consuming a movie that isn't didactically telling them how to feel at every single moment. Because we've been trained over 15 years of consistently lazy film and television, YouTube videos, TikToks, and constant mindless Twitter discourse to ignore subtext. It's the attitude of, I love learning things, but I don't like learning things I don't like, because that feels bad. Just shutting my brain off and letting the algorithm take over is way easier. Then it can spoon-feed me whatever it thinks I need. This is what creates the ideology of ignorance. Not ignorance as an accidental thing, we've all done that. Ignorance as a conscious choice to avoid feeling uncomfortable, that eventually snowballs into something that isn't even a choice anymore, because it's how you look at the world. The brain is a muscle, and if you don't exercise it, you won't ever grow or learn, and eventually, even the process of learning feels too difficult to engage with. So, eventually, to you, the curtains are just fucking blue. Except in almost every single piece of media and work of art that has ever existed. Yes, even the bad ones. Even the ones that are trying as hard as they possibly can not to have an ideology or a point. Not AI, though. That's the difference. AI doesn't have an ideology. Because it's not art. And here's a fun secret. Even if the curtains are just fucking blue, you can interpret them however you want. Maybe the author just likes the color, but that doesn't mean you're not allowed to speculate and interpret it in your own way. Does that mean that every single interpretation of art is correct and nobody can be wrong? No. People who tell you that are usually stupid. If you need a better example of that, look at the Starship Troopers discourse. Conservatives missing the point of the fascism satire because they ignored the barely even subtext because the fasci vibes were just so sick and cool, are interpreting art wrong.
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
You're allowed to completely ignore the thesis of a piece of art or take it the wrong way entirely, but don't then expect people not to call you a moron. That's just basic common sense. Oh. And speaking of common sense, it seems like we talk a lot at the moment about people not knowing basic common sense stuff. Playing TikToks full volume in public, not letting people off the train before they try to push on, not asking how people are in response to them asking how you are. You know, the stuff we should all know. And I say this as somebody with many autistic and neurodivergent friends. I say this as a neurospicy myself. A lot of these things are things we should all know. Autistic people learn the social contracts to get around in the world, even if it takes them 4 times the energy of a neurotypical person, because otherwise they're rejected and othered. Now, obviously not everybody can learn these things, and I'm not suggesting this makes them lesser, but it's extremely disingenuous that every time somebody points out that common sense seems to be degrading, people cry ableism. Most of the autistic people I know want to commit unspeakable crimes to the people playing full volume TikToks on the bus. Because weirdly, a lot of those common sense social contract things benefit everybody. So when a large portion of the population stop doing them, it starts to affect everything. And obviously, this is mostly because of lockdowns. People forgot how to act in public. But oh my god, babes, it is 2024. If you still haven't relearned how to be polite to service workers or not disrupt the public, that's a fucking skill issue. Again, I'm not talking to people who can't learn these things. I'm directly talking to those of y'all who absolutely know it is rude to shove your way onto a train before people get off, or make loud, obnoxious phone calls in a small space, or walk 4 abreast on a path so that somebody walking towards you has to step onto the road to get around you, or refuses to put in headphones. Stop playing your TikToks for the fucking tube!
You still have to teach people common sense. If they don't learn common sense, they will not have it. It's not innate. It doesn't spring from thin air. Society creates the systems in which we learn common sense, and a lot of people seem to have just started ignoring it. As J. Drake says in their article on artificial stupidity in the National Journal of Education way back in 1878,
it naturally follows that when the irregular pupils are in their classes, they cannot understand the lesson. They cannot keep their attention on the recitation, even if they try. And when reproved by the teacher, they are either sullen and obstinate or discouraged. In either case, they gain nothing, but lose much mental control. If the teacher allows such occurrences without strong attempts to work a cure, he becomes culpable. Irregular habits of any kind may in the same manner affect mental growth. Closely allied to this is irregular treatment of scholars, as severity and indulgence, favoritism and personal animosities, or long and short lessons. Any kind of injustice produces stubbornness or timidity and weakness of intellect. This is true in all departments of life where the sufferer has not the stronger mind. Lack of system is another evil. Modern development demands systematic work in every industry. For this, mature minds are needed, that the pupil may gain real knowledge instead of doubtful snatches of ideas when he flounders alone. Not only is he taught knowledge, but taught how to gain knowledge. The personnel of the teacher is a potent influence on the sensitive minds of youth. Everything that cheers and enlivens, strengthens the mind, Harshness and fretfulness drive to stupidity. Let us beware how we make school repulsive and thwart the natural eagerness of youth, for thus we create artificial stupidity.
But this lack of common sense isn't just from not being taught it, it's from social isolation that has made people more self-focused. They're the main character of their story, so why wouldn't you want to hear all the TikToks that they specifically find funny? Why wouldn't you just step aside for them when they walk? Why wouldn't you let them shout at you as a service worker? That's what you're there for. Apologies for generalizing, but as a 10-year customer service veteran, this is why old people are always the worst to serve. They have no qualms being outright rude and nasty to us because they're often a lot further removed from daily society, being retired and not having to interact with the public every single day, and a lot more selfish because they no longer have their children to look out for. But I can tell you that post-lockdown, while the old people have gotten worse, so has everybody else. It's easy to say that the idea that people have become worse post-lockdowns is due to circumstantial, anecdotal stories, and there are a lot of those. But unfortunately, that anecdotal evidence only points to a larger, more worrying trend. My schoolteacher friends have seen it with their own eyes. People are taking to Reddit to express their concerns about it, and journalists are reporting on it with increasing regularity. Schools across the planet have reported an increase in antisocial behavior from students. There's a clear rise in misogyny and negative beliefs due to the distribution of propaganda that's been made easier by online echo chambers. And on top of all of that, studies on long COVID have indicated that it can negatively alter your personality and mood regulation. A recent Australian Senate Committee report on classroom behaviour reported that
the percentage of teachers who felt unsafe increased from 18.9% to 24.5% from 2019 to 2020. Student behaviour and violence was cited as one factor among many, including parent abuse, negative relationships with staff and school leaders, and concerns related to COVID-19. The submission noted that disability was a common denominator for repeatedly suspended students who were not having their needs met. The report noted that teachers were not provided the time, support, or access to specialist colleagues to provide the required level of care for those students. A 2021 survey from the Australian Educational Union found 89% of public school principals were having to divert funds from other parts of school budgets because they did not have the resources to support students with disabilities. And now we get to the part of the video that, if you know me at all, you were suspecting all along. Capitalism is making us stupid. I've already kind of mentioned this in the previous section, but I feel that I should emphasize that the reason movies are worse now, and algorithms are pushing dumb shit at us, and moronic discourse is happening every single day, is because of capitalism. Algorithms want us to engage as much as possible, so they'll push the stupidest stuff towards us because they know people will want to argue with it. On top of this, Google no longer shows exact results in their Google searches, because they would rather earn more money from advertisers than have a usable service. Which means that if you're trying to learn and you go to Google something, it might not even give you the answer. The first 15 websites might be ads, or the results you get might be skewed by confirmation bias of enough people clicking the wrong answer that it becomes the top result. Because they're no longer keeping an eye on their system to prevent things like this, and in most cases, actively discouraging it. It makes the process of trying to search something to become more knowledgeable a fucking crystal maze puzzle that's rigged against you. And let's double back onto that previous point about how watching Parasite or enjoying Nope makes you a pretentious snob and not like a normal guy who watches movies. Why is knowing things seen as pretentious? Classism. Obviously. In a lot of ways, learning is a privilege. If you're working class, the deck is stacked against you, and there comes a point where learning starts to feel like an indulgence. I was raised in a household where learning was inherent to interacting with the world. We loved QI and played educational computer games and hit the borrow limit every time we went to the library. On the rare occasion we went overseas, we interacted with the cultures rather than sticking to hotels and tourist hotspots. But one of my parents was a teacher, so I had easier access to learning resources than other people might have had. We were working class, but not destitute, so I could afford to get to school every day, to rest well, to do my homework instead of working side jobs to help keep my family afloat. People in worse situations than me would have had a much higher barrier to entry when it comes to things that I tend to think of as basic learning milestones. And that's my privilege, and I have to own that.
And it's not just classism. It's also classism's arguably more evil cousin, racism. It's a well-known fact that black people have historically been presumed to be less intelligent than white people, hence the segregation of schools, the refusal to relinquish slavery long after it had been fought against, and the propagation of pseudoscience like phrenology. And in the opposite direction, the presumption of intelligence levied at Asian people, usually meaning Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, can be incredibly damaging for those people who are constantly up against expectations they might never clear simply because they, and this is in huge air quotes, look smart. Classism, racism, and gender inequality are hand in hand when it comes to the treatment of people's supposed innate intelligence, and it really needs to stop.
Classism, rooted in the capitalist macro-level class structures of exploitation, pits humans against humans. In the dialectics of structure versus agency, the macro-level institutions of class exploitation and conflict clearly have a logic and dynamic of their own, independent of the wills of individuals who occupy positions within those structures, constraining what people can and cannot do. Understanding the class structure of capitalism and its class-based dynamics are critical to an understanding of the class oppression of working men and women of all racial/ethnic groups. Human agency is constrained by the macro-level class structures of capitalism while at the same time determining, reproducing as well as transforming, those same structures. Understanding both the personal and social dynamics of class as a system of oppression and questions of human agency, voice, and identity are critical to fully grasping the phenomena of class oppression and class struggle. Only through such complex understandings will we be able to meet the challenges of race, gender, and class liberation, and to create a society free of classism and based on racial and gender equality.
A presumption of stupidity before a person even has a chance to prove themselves, whether because of somebody's class, race, gender, or anything else, is only ever going to stunt the intellectual growth of that person.
But we can't let this gatekeeping of learning affect people's desire to learn. Because the moment that anti-intellectualism becomes the norm, we'll no longer have people striving for better. Which is what capitalism wants. Capitalism, colonialism, and classism go hand in hand in the worst kind of Ouroboros in order to keep people feeding the machine. Poor people work more jobs for worse pay, so they don't have time to learn their way out, which means they'll raise another generation of people who will work more jobs for worse pay. And on the flip side, those people who can afford a good education feel entitled to it because they've never known otherwise. They feel their intelligence is inherent rather than bolstered by the circumstances which enabled them to learn better than others simply by an accident of birth. And I know that's making some of you really uncomfortable right now, but if you feel yourself struggling not to argue with me in the comments about that, I would suggest reading comments by Nepo babies about how they're totally not a Nepo baby, and what do you mean? Having celebrity parents didn't help them become celebrities at all! And then maybe reconsider that comment. Instead of seeing students from low SES groups as needy and expensive to educate, the problem could be thought of in terms of a wider context of policy failure. That is, failure to provide at federal and community levels the basic personal and social infrastructure necessary for all students to excel. The ability to learn skills or enter a field of study should not be gatekept from anybody. It should be a human right, and treating it like a privilege is a one-way ticket on the train to fascism. That's a bit heavy. So for this next section, why don't we do something a bit lighter? Let's talk about my stupidity survey.
Now, we don't have time to unpack all of that.
I won't lie to you boys. This was rough. Thanks to the boosting in scope from my kind YouTuber friends, I got 2,534 responses to my silly little survey, and it was incredibly overwhelming. Going through that data was a big reason why this video took as long as it did to come out. And annoyingly, it feels like I'm only really discussing a tiny percentage of everything I received and went through, but that's one of the pitfalls of research. You do a bunch of work and then the public only sees this much of it. One of the other pitfalls of research is when the data collection doesn't go quite how you'd hoped. So I'm now going to have to devote a significant portion of this video to analysing how the survey almost accidentally proved my point about how people aren't necessarily getting stupider, but they are getting more careless and less inquisitive and analytical. Now, as previously mentioned, I'm smart in my own way, but that doesn't mean I'm smart in every way. For example, I find looking at large swathes of unorganised data incredibly difficult. I don't have that kind of analytical brain. I have spent time on it and I'm better at it than I used to be, but I still find it hard to pass through. Luckily, I have a wonderful friend who is good at that kind of thing and loves organising spreadsheets, and thanks to her, seriously, thank you Abby, you're a godsend and you deserve the world, I have a much more comprehensive organisation of the data than I would have otherwise. Thanks to them, I have a clear idea of the age and gender breakdown of the entire survey, Before, I could see that 47% of respondents were in the 18 to 25 bracket and 38.4% of all respondents were male, but now I have a breakdown of every reported gender breakdown and their age bracket. I didn't single out trans people in the gender survey because, say it with me kids, trans women are women and trans men are men, but some people chose to self-identify as trans in the survey, while others self-ID'd as something that falls under the purvey of gender fluidity or lack of gender, but with more specificity than in the category I left for that. Now, when I left the fill-in-the-blank box for certain questions, I largely did it as a failsafe for things like that. If you think I missed something so egregious that isn't covered by the available answers, or you wanted to deliberately specify something, I wanted you to let me know, because I also wanted to learn more through doing this. Unfortunately, that box was abused so badly that it made me regret releasing the survey in the first place. Let me give you an idea of the kind of stress some of these fill-in-the-blank box answers gave us. To start with, both of the self-ID'd trans women said they think they're unintelligent, and if either of you are watching, may I just say, work on your self-confidence, queens! Some of the people on this survey who self-ID'd as intelligent gave some truly baffling answers to simple questions. Like, for example, as Abby stressed to me when she was reaching the halfway point of organizing the data, I've sorted through 625 of these answers, and the number of men that answer the "why do you consider yourself intelligent" question with incredibly short answers where they say they're better than other people and or mention IQ tests while also containing typos is remarkable. And neither of you did that. Please know your worth. And obviously this doesn't cover every trans woman who filled in a survey. Some of them will have just clicked women, some of them will have clicked gender fluidity. That's fine. I'm just saying to the two of you that self-ID'd as trans women, believe in yourself. Sometimes people just straight up answered wrong. For example, some people on the question about being neurodivergent ticked the other box, and then the follow-up question about their neurodivergence filled in the blank anyway. Obviously that's a little bit frustrating, but maybe they just misunderstood. What was most baffling was that when Abby was going through the data from this question, she discovered this. I'm working the neurodivergence question right now, and the number of people that answered that question wrong is higher than even initially thought. I thought it was just the people that answered other and then filled in the blank with their diagnoses we had to worry about. But no! There were also people who said they were neurotypical and then in the describe your neurodivergence box proceeded to say they'd been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, do I think those people are stupid? Not necessarily. It's entirely possible that they misclicked, or even that they don't actually know what counts as neurodivergence, but it does make the data collected a little bit less reliable when you know some people are skimming the questions like that. When it came to the what is intelligent / why are you intelligent question, both Abby and I started to become frustrated at some of the answers. Everyone is intelligent because we're human is an answer that makes sense on the surface, but really becomes a non-answer when you're taking into account that this is a survey about what makes intelligence. So if you don't elaborate on that point, you may as well have not said anything. And not to discriminate by gender, but the number of men who say they think they're intelligent because they have life experience was interesting. The phrases, "I know a lot of information" and "I've studied philosophy" also came up a lot. Being good at puzzles as a prerequisite for intelligence came up more than a few times. IQ was mentioned far too many times for me to be comfortable, and I'd rather not drag specific people for their answers when they kindly filled in a survey for me that they didn't have to do. But when I tell you that some of them made me need to go for a walk in the fresh air, I need you to understand how mind-boggling they were. On the question, if you do believe people are getting stupider, what do you feel is the most to blame? I already had to edit it once to say, please pick one, because I've boiled it down to the most obvious answers, and the point of the question isn't what's actually causing it, it's about what people perceive the problem to be. But people kept ticking the other box and writing a dissertation in it. So I then had to edit it a second time to say, if yes, what do you see as the most to blame? Most being the key word here. Pick one. The actual cause is not the point of this question. It's the perception of what the average person thinks is causing it. Please keep this in mind when answering the question. And even after I changed it, as I was looking over the incoming answers, one of them was lack of compression. They mean comprehension. You cannot make this up, I swear to God. I'm really not trying to shame anyone individually. So if that was your answer, I'm sure that you just made a spelling mistake. But to randomly pick out some of the more frustrating or baffling answers from this question, which again was spelled out to be the kind of question where you pick one answer, largely because I have a space to elaborate later on, somebody said lack of parental interaction after lockdown. Parenting is quite literally one of the options on the list. This actually happened a few times with people typing in answers like TikTok and capitalism when those answers were already there to click. The sheer number of people who said, I clicked no, but I'm going to elaborate anyway, truly made me exhausted. 3 different answers in a row started with some variation of, well, I don't think people are getting stupider, but... And it's like, girl, did you even read the question at this point? Because, like, you're proving my point that people are getting stupider. Because, like I said, stupid isn't an inherent thing you're born with. Stupid is the thing that you do. The how critical are you of the information you receive question was interesting because most people rated themselves between a 6 and an 8 on the scale, indicating that they're somewhat healthily skeptical. 85 people indicated that they're a 10, which implies that they don't believe anything anybody tells them ever without peer-reviewed evidence. And an even more fascinating 11 people indicated that they sat at a 1 or a 2 on the scale, implying that they will simply believe anything anybody tells them. And hey, at least they're self-aware. I asked for your additional thoughts, and some of you left really insightful comments that genuinely gave me more food for thought and steered my research into interesting places. And some of y'all... Okay, so a big part of critical thinking and reading comprehension, and trust me, I will get more into this in my other video, is in understanding what the person doesn't need to say in order for something to be true.
Part of reading comprehension is being able to infer the intended audience of a piece of text without the author telling you directly. You're supposed to be able to engage with a piece of text and say, I think the intended audience is blank. You are not supposed to need clarifications at the beginning of a text saying, now obviously I'm not talking about A, B, C, and D. You're supposed to be able to figure that out on your own.
This brings us back to the blue curtains theory, or more specifically, the so you hate waffles phenomenon. If you read somebody's tweet about liking jogging and decide that they're ableist against people who can't jog, you're stupid. I cannot make it clearer than that. You lack critical thinking and reading comprehension skills, and I'm genuinely imploring you to sit with yourself and think about why you're so desperate to leap to a baseless assumption that you can only draw from a statement by taking it for granted that your belief is correct, simply because they didn't cover every single base before you saw it.
I could say I like watching movies with my friends, and someone in the comment section will be like, oh, so you don't like blind people then? What? When did I say that? I made a video yesterday where I was making fun of picky eaters, and people in the comment section are like, I'm autistic. Bro, obviously you're exempt. If I make a video and I say that I don't like slow walkers, and your response is, but I was born with 1 leg. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Dude, you are obviously an exception. Am I going to throw a ball at someone who has no hands and demand that they catch the ball? Come on now. I'm not going to be walking behind someone who clearly cannot walk fast and demand that they walk faster. Not only is that unfair, it doesn't even make sense. So if I'm speaking about something people do, there are going to be clear exemptions. Clear and obvious exemptions, so obvious that they don't even need to be mentioned.
Not every statement a person makes should come with 15 caveats and clarifying statements. We're not writing amendments to the Constitution. And if you can't understand the meaning of a statement without needing people to rule out every single thing the statement isn't saying, you're stupid. And I'm saying this with my whole chest. And the reason I feel comfortable saying this with my whole chest is that if you're down there commenting about how I'm ableist or mean or a woke leftist cuck or whatever for calling you stupid, you didn't listen to anything I said up until this point. And unfortunately, on a lesser scale, there were a number of answers that fell into the making assumptions simply because I didn't directly rule them out trap in this survey. Didn't intend for that to be a trap, but it sure became one. Do I think all of those people are stupid? No. But I am trying to make you think critically about how you read and respond to questions, so walk with me a little on this. I promise I will be kind to you. I think what it comes down to, fundamentally, is that more than anything, people want to be seen as intelligent, which means that even if I didn't ask the question, they will find a way of telling me the answer I didn't ask for. Because for some reason, they've decided that their opinion is more important than the question. This goes for all the people writing elaborate, intelligent, thought-out answers in the blank box on my question that repeatedly specified wanting one answer. I wasn't asking you to solve the problem of why people are stupider. I was asking for what societally we see as most to blame. But a not insignificant number of people didn't want to answer that question. They wanted to solve the problem of why people are stupider, and rather than leave that to the section at the end for further thoughts, they simply changed the question in their head and answered that one. This is what the people are stupider thing really comes down to. And I don't want any of you to walk away from this feeling bullied or dumb because you answered a survey wrong. But there is a lack of intellectual humility that causes us, and I say us because I'm sure I've done it too, to try and overcompensate when given a chance to speak without critically thinking about the context in which we're speaking. For example, my question about learning types was framed in a very specific way that I was planning to use in the video. Specifically, that the old-fashioned way of classifying learning types into visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic are outdated, and most people use all of those and more in order to successfully learn and retain information. The old system told teachers that everybody has one type that helps them learn best, but actually the main divide between learning styles for most people is whether they're social or solitary learners, and most people find it easiest to learn when utilizing most or all of these supposed types of learning. That's why I made that question a tick all that apply, because I wanted to essentially back up the data that educational bodies have already expressed in an anecdotal form for my video. But some people were so incensed upon seeing that I had added those 4 types to the question that rather than think critically about why they might be there, they simply rushed to tell me, in no uncertain terms, that those types are outdated and we don't use them anymore. Interesting how you have this presumption of intelligence about somebody enough that you want to watch their videos, but then you somehow think they're not intelligent enough to have done the research and know what they're talking about. This happens a lot. Comments like that happen a lot under videos. I appreciate the sentiment behind that in one way, but in another way I'm slightly offended that you seem to think I didn't do any research at all before I put together that survey. And I'm sure that you weren't thinking, Talis is stupid so she put the question together wrong. But in your rush to well actually me over my own survey, you only exposed your own lack of critical thinking ability. And again, I don't say this to deride you, only to make you think about these things and how to avoid making the same mistakes going forward. I've put the graphs Abby made into a PDF linked below if you want to go through them yourself because it is interesting data, but if I talk about it anymore, I'm going to start screaming. So let's move on.
That's not great. And I'm sure, individually, you're all very intelligent people, and I'm not having a go at any one of you. I appreciate all of you for participating, and I wish you the best. But there is a certain level of learned obtuseness that has led people to either skim the question without really taking it in, or just rewrite the question in their head entirely because they had something to say and they wanted to say it, regardless of if it fit or not. This isn't entirely your fault. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is to do with the constant dumbing down of media in order to sell to the widest possible audience, which means that most things you watch or interact with don't expect you to tap into your critical thinking abilities. Add to that the nuclear combination of TikTok and lockdowns on the human brain, and how that has made learning new information uncomfortable to the point where people have started, consciously or unconsciously, rejecting it, and you've got a recipe for disaster. But more than that, we're just not teaching people how to be smart.
I was a middle school teacher and I was a high school teacher. And I need you to know America's in a literacy crisis and they're not making a big enough deal about it. Our children cannot read, let alone writing a paragraph, let alone comprehension. They cannot read. They do not know how to sound words out. They were not taught that. And if you're wondering, well, then why does my kid just keep getting passed on to the next grade? Because that's what they're doing now. They're not holding the children back. They're moving them on. They're graduating them, knowing that your child is illiterate. They been knew the babies couldn't read and didn't care. You know when they started caring? After the pandemic. Them test scores plummeted. First of all, test scores for reading were pretty stagnant for the last decade. But after the pandemic, they plummeted. Now they're trying to push science of reading. That's the way. And if you're like, what's science of reading? That's what we was doing. And by we, I'm talking about millennials and older. The little book. When we were sounding words out, now they're trying to bring that back. And if you're like, wait, they stopped doing that? Yes! For years, they stopped doing it. If you have the opportunity and the privilege, right? Because taking off from work is a privilege. I'm talking to parents and guardians. Start going to these PTSA meetings and these district meetings. They are passing so many policies and they're banking on the fact that parents and families are not going to show up. You need to know what those policies are and how they're affecting your children, particularly Black and brown children. They know families can't or won't show up.
It's impossible to go anywhere on the internet without seeing somebody trying to sell you their latest course about how to pick up women, why your glasses are fascist and you can see, actually. or how to earn $8 quadrillion simply by dropshipping AI, NFT, crypto clout. MLMs, but with extra steps. May I be the first to tell you that nobody has ever or will ever learn anything from any of those courses. Please, for the love of God, just join something like Skillshare or take a class. I am so serious. Because here's the thing that those grifters absolutely know, but are counting on you, the wider public, not knowing. Consuming is not learning. They don't want you to learn, because if you learn, you grow out of the need to take their courses. In the same way that Nigerian prince phone scams are stupid and unbelievable on purpose. They're not trying to catch everybody. They're specifically weeding out the people that are too smart to know better, because the unknowledgeable ones are easier to scam. If we bring up everybody's awareness of phone scams, their pool of victims only gets smaller. And this goes for the online course grifters too. The more commentary YouTubers who take the courses just to show you how stupid and pointless they are, the more nature heals. But that isn't stopping these grifters from doing it, because unless you're on YouTube, it's not like there's a course for spotting fake courses. Rarely is that the kind of thing that's going to come up in a town hall meeting or on the school playground to those thousands of boys who got sucked in by Andrew Tate and the Manosphere. A lot of these courses, if you don't know anything about the people who made them, can look legitimate if you don't know how to spot it. If you're not terminally online, or you're a terminally online child or teenager, you're not looking for a scam. You're looking at what appears to be a completely reasonable and professional course run by somebody who claims to know what they're talking about, and usually has the money to flash around to prove it.
Do what I want, where I want, with who I want, and make a lot of money doing it. I spent hours and hours and hours developing something I call Edfluence.
So he just spent the last minute, he spent the last 6 minutes kind of building up to this, because by bragging about all the things he was able to buy and the things he's able to do, and then transitioning into being like, look, I live a great life, you know that. Oh, wait, I think there might be a way for you to live the life that I've showed off to you.
If you can't follow the roadmap, then there's just no chance you'll make it into Team 1000 or maybe even as a social media influencer. You know already that there are millions of Jake Paulers watching this right now, and if you wait on this, you'll probably miss your shot at 1,000.
Oh no, he's right.
They don't want to tell you that their empire was actually built on luck and grifting, because the course itself is part of that grift. And thus, the cycle will continue to repeat until we stamp these morons out in the same way we mostly did with Nigerian phone scams. It's a process, and it involves all of us learning what to look out for. So let's wrap this up by looking towards the future. How do we not be stupid? How to learn good. I was a gifted kid, by which I mean I had undiagnosed ADHD that worked well within the school system. I was academically intelligent. I tested well. When I was in primary school, I was being given high school reading and spelling tests. I was a year up from my peers, so I was the youngest in my grade my entire schooling life, but since I left school, I've become less good at spelling. I'm worser at it. Comedy. That's not because I'm dumber now, it's because I'm not constantly in an environment where I'm being tested on my spelling, which means I'm not focusing on my spelling, which means I'm not going to learn or retain new words at the speed and volume that I did back then. In 2020, I had a breakdown and watched 67 K-dramas in 6 weeks, watched my various videos about it, and in order to justify that to myself, I started learning Korean with intention. I enjoy learning the language, but I'll never be fluent until I'm having near-daily conversations with actual Korean people, so I will eternally be learning to barely speak a language, and that's okay. It doesn't make me stupid that I've been learning for 4 years and I'm not as fluent as a native speaker, because they've had their whole life to learn it, and I'm not going to stop practicing just because I'm disheartened by what looks like a lack of progress. But a lot of people, especially adults, will hit a wall like this when trying to learn something and just walk away. And a lot of this is because of how we treat them as children. Curiosity is an amazing thing, but the school system tends to ignore it in favor of learning only what it wants you to memorize. And a lot of people take that attitude out into the real world afterwards and don't know how to onboard new information. Those conservatives who refuse to listen to trans voices are genuinely just scared of something new, and they don't know how to challenge themselves on it, so they lash out at the trans people instead. Does that make it okay? Absolutely not. But it does explain a lot of where it comes from. We should be teaching children to stay curious so that they grow up into questioning adults and mature into inquisitive elders. The brain is a muscle, and we have to work it out. So how do we do that, I hear you ask? I did a tutoring PGCE, so you think I'd be the best person to teach this, but that's precisely the problem. Teaching degrees don't always teach you how to learn. They teach you how to teach. And unfortunately, those are very different things. For years, there was an outdated teaching model that assumed most people have a preferred intake method for information in order to learn best. Auditory, visual, kinesthetic, doing it, and writing/repetition, etc. This has become outdated in the same way that the left and right brain idea has. It's not that it's entirely false, it's just that it's not the whole picture. Left brain and right brain are not real, but analytical and creative thought are different. Researching this video does not feel the same, does not engage the same parts of me as writing my novels does. But the line between them is a lot more blurred than people like to think, and things only get better the more you blur them. Without imagination, there would be no innovation. It's the same with learning. Some people might prefer to watch a video about a topic than to write lines about it, but that doesn't mean that only those ways of engaging with information will help them learn. In actuality, it's usually a combination of all four of those things that truly enables actual learning to take place, which is why we've moved past the need to categorize them that way. I put them in my survey, along with more updated learning approaches, to prove the point that most people will pick more than one, and almost all of them picked more than 3. Because the more ways the information is presented to you, the easier it is to assimilate. Learning isn't a one-trick pony. You don't just get told something and know it. That ain't how that shit works. I thought I hated podcasts because I struggled to listen to them, but I don't think that's true. I think I hate rambling, unstructured discussions of issues. I do enough of that in my daily life. And I love it when I get to participate, but listening to somebody pontificate for 2 hours with very little pushback or citing of sources can grate at me. I realized this because I got a job where I used headphones and started listening to my favorite YouTube videos while I worked. The lack of visuals didn't stop me from retaining the information, although I do recommend watching the videos more. It's just a more fun experience, plus we put a lot of effort into editing and visuals, because video essays are more structured and curated, which is why some podcasts work for me and most don't. I'll happily watch the Sad Boys podcast, love those boys, hit me up kings, but I don't like actually listening to it as a podcast because it doesn't gel right with my particular flavor of brain. It's the ADHD. If I'm listening to two people have a conversation, I have to be able to see it to engage, to feel like a third person in the conversation, even if I'm not speaking, which just doesn't work for a podcast, which means that all of those like crime podcasts and educational podcasts really don't work for me. I'd rather watch a video essay. And this goes for most things. A lot of people don't want to read dry, lengthy academic papers in order to research whether or not they're right about something, but they'll happily watch a video essay made by somebody who has done that boring research because they still want the information those papers might provide. As I said earlier, not all talent is inherent. Most of it is made through work, even if you have some kind of biological advantage. You think Serena Williams has never practiced tennis in her life? No. And it's also partly because we've made learning, particularly academic learning, a hard field to get into, that people think they'll fail before they start, so they don't even try. But as bioethicists on Tumblr points out,
I do feel like a lot of people do not realize that not all readings are designed to be read like a novel. As in, it's okay and normal and good to need to reread a paragraph several times, to only read part of a book, to have to research or reference words or concepts in order to grasp the reading, to skip over large chunks of text which are not relevant to your expertise, to continue reading despite not understanding a concept. This is something neurotypical academics do frequently, and many of these texts, especially contemporary ones, were designed with this in mind. There are many people with accessibility needs that are not being met by academic texts at this time. Many texts, in my humble opinion, are unnecessarily complex in order to show off or hide the fact that they have no idea what they're talking about. I still feel like many of the knee-jerk reactions on this site are based on the assumption that their experience reading academic texts should be similar to their experiences reading a New York Times bestseller, rather than a process of thinking, analyzing, researching, processing, returning. Some of you are telling yourself that any challenges you face while reading are a result of some internal fault you have, and not an expected and precious part of the experience.
And as SQBR points out in their response, being able to read this way is a specific skill separate to your starting understanding of the material. It's something you learn through practice, and it's not always the most comfortable thing in the world. I love writing essays, I love research, but do you think that no part of this video was frustrating and made me want to quit? Do you think my dissertation was easy simply because I'm practiced at stuff like that? Do you think I don't struggle to keep my eyes focused on the driest paper in existence about learning methods? I would much rather spend my time vegging out watching K-dramas, but that isn't going to help me finish this video. But sometimes, when the words are starting to blur together, I do have to do that. Walking away and getting space from the work is also a vital part of the learning process. Like I said earlier, consuming is not learning. And if I spend 8 hours sitting at a computer reading every single research paper on JSTOR that has the word learning in it, but I don't retain any information, then those 8 hours would have been better spent watching a show. Because at least then I would have been engaging my brain in some way, instead of pretending to engage it in order to make myself look and feel smarter. That's like if instead of going for a healthy walk for myself, I decided to go to the gym and jump straight into attempting to deadlift. Obviously, I'm not getting that thing even half a centimeter off the ground. And obviously, neurodivergencies in learning affect this massively. Sometimes my ADHD means I literally cannot sit and focus. Sometimes it means I lose track of all time entirely, and then 16 hours later I've got a finished essay. God, I hope that happens with this one. Autistic people have similar struggles. People with OCD and depression and anxiety can struggle to motivate themselves to finish a project, or get stuck in anxiety loops and become unable to finish projects. In order to learn, you have to give yourself the grace to fail. And sometimes you have to expect the feeling of learning to be grating and uncomfortable. Sometimes it is hard work. And the real skill is knowing when it's the kind of hard work you push through to see results, or whether it's the kind that you do need to take a break from. Same as any workout you'd do in the gym. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, your brain is a goddamn muscle.
The basic steps of learning are this. Break it down. Whatever it is, whether it's a math problem, a literary analysis, a news article, a recipe, a carpentry project, or literally anything else, break it into consumable, understandable pieces. Then, take the time to understand those pieces. If it's a news article, is the headline actually reflective of the content of the article? What political position is the author coming from? Does that affect the bias of the piece? Where did they source their information? Are their sources biased? Etc, etc. This would be a great place to have a Ground News sponsorship, but I don't. Ground News, hit me up. Then, seek out the parts you don't understand, or find yourself disagreeing with, and ask yourself, why? Is it a lack of information, or does it go up against preconceived ideas you already have? Sometimes you just need to sit with an idea for a while before you come around to it, even if that feeling is really uncomfortable at first, because nobody likes feeling like they're wrong about things. Then, put it all back together and view it as a whole. Assimilate it as information and move forward. Put it in different contexts, make sure you understand it and aren't just parroting remembered information, because that's not learning, that's just memorization. Unless you understand something, you're not learning. This goes for any skill. A while ago on Twitter, this school exercise went semi-viral, asking students to tweet from the trenches, and most people responded to this, memeing on the idea. And hey, I won't say those memes weren't funny as hell. Some of my friends made some. As to as Wassisi pointed out, honestly, this stuff is why these lesson plans are actually incredibly clever. Do you know enough to distill the info into a tweet? Do you get it clearly enough to make the tweet funny? That means you actually understand and aren't just regurgitating facts and dates. We used to do exercises like this all the time in school. Writing a letter from the front line, writing a report on a historical incident, writing a soliloquy in iambic pentameter to show that you actually understand how Shakespearean language works, rather than just reading it, and to help you assimilate that information better by using it in more varied ways. It might appear silly, but sometimes that's the point. Do you understand the information enough to simplify it without watering it down or turning it into misinformation? One of my friends is a high school teacher, and one of her classes is about making those like Sparks Notes style memes about the famous old literature they're reading, about Shakespeare plays and things like that. Making the memes is a class exercise because it's using that information in a different way. It shows you understand it. And her students all love it, and it helps them retain the information better. Even the most well-intentioned of us fall for misinformation. Sometimes the most articulate person is wrong despite their intentions, and sometimes you miss obvious satire, and sometimes you just fall for an actual lie designed to make you fall for it. I do it myself. Read a tweet that feels correct and just roll with that information until community notes pulls me up on my assumptions. But we have to start being more careful not to spread things without at least a tiny bit of critical thought, because it's genuinely starting to impact the concept of truth and the accurate, factual spreading of information. But on top of how to think critically, you should also just be taking care of your brain in general.
I watch how many people abuse their brains every day, and it actually infuriates me. They aren't hydrated. The first thing they do when they wake up is grab a phone. They sleep with TVs on, they don't read, they don't do puzzles, they don't even think and exercise critical thought and discernment before getting up and asking for an answer. Terrible. The process of neuroplasticity actually relies on you repetitiously doing something to strengthen the synapses. Learning, on a synaptic level, is not a one and done thing. It is repetitive. If you want the new skill to root, you actually have to keep working on it. Common sense. You'd think the organ that has the highest metabolic demand in the body would get more love, but clearly not.
Punkit is here responded to that thread with important advice for all of us, and I've added to it because this is truly how to learn and grow. Hydrate your brain by drinking lots of water, eating foods high in antioxidants like dark chocolate and walnuts and salmon and blueberries, and also don't forget to consume enough sugar. Diet culture can make you think sugar is evil, but we need a certain amount of sugar to reach effective brain function. If you're still a diet nut, eat a bunch of fruit. Play little brain games on your phone, take up Sudoku, do puzzles, play video games, join a pub quiz team. Anything that gets you using that noggin of yours outside of the academic context. Watch a movie with the intent of analysis. This is best done with a cinephile friend, or even a friend that knows nothing about cinema. Talk about tropes and symbolism and character growth and expand your horizons. Read books. It's simple but necessary. Even better, join a book club or read with a friend so that you can have discussions after, so it doesn't feel like you're alone in your reading. This will improve your reading comprehension. Do not turn to TikTok. I promise you, it will not help you. It is the one ring of book discussions. It seems alluring, but it will drag you down. TikTok is great for media recommendations, but do not get sucked into the book or TV discourse vortex. It will make your reading and media comprehension worse. Learn a new dance. Even a TikTok trendy dance. Learning new dance moves are proven to strengthen synapses. And to be fair, any kind of exercise is good for you and your brain. Take up rollerblading or running or yoga. Do laser tag once a week. God, I wish I could do laser tag once a week. Does anybody want to come do laser tag once a week with me? Develop a consistent sleep schedule, or as close to consistent as you can get. This is a bad one for me, but I'm working on it. Your brain works best when it's well rested, and your version of rest might look different to others, so you might only need 6 hours a night instead of 9, but you should listen to your body and rest when it tells you to. Go bird watching, or foraging, or anything outdoors that requires you to explore pattern recognition and visual searching. This is a really good one from Punkit is Here. Interacting with nature is always good, but even more so when you're doing it with purpose. Cross-stitch, or sew, or do anything that requires matching nimble hand movements to patterns, or play and learn an instrument, or try painting and sketching, even if it's terrible. Especially if it's terrible. You have to be bad at something before you can master it. Nobody falls out of the womb being a master painter. Just doesn't happen.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Most importantly, be okay with that. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Make peace with being bad at things and not enjoying the learning process and getting frustrated and failing, because stupidity is, at its core, either an active choice caused by assuming you already know everything, or learned helplessness caused by a world that caters to you to the point where you don't know how to push back against it anymore. And it can be overcome. You just have to learn, and to know, as Socrates said, that you know nothing. If you do that, we might all just be okay.
So the first half of this video was filmed literally the night before I flew out to Australia, and the second half of this video is filmed about a month, 6 weeks-ish after I got to Australia, staying at a friend's house, which is why the lighting changes constantly. It's why the mic setup isn't as good, because I don't have the equipment that I have in my house. Seeing people that I haven't seen in a really long time, catching up, has been part of the reason why this video took such a long time to get out. The other part of the reason why this video took such a long time to get out is because I've been extremely unwell. I have had the worst chronic illness flare-up of my life so far, and considering that I've been discussing my illness on my channel for 2 years, that's saying something. I have been so fatigued, so brain fogged, so muscle fatigued. Like, I do something really minor and I feel the effects of that for days afterwards, you know? It's been extremely difficult, and it has made it so that I couldn't focus on editing, I couldn't function properly, and it's been really fucking difficult. I've been to my doctor in Australia, and he's already prescribed me a bunch of stuff to see if that'll help. I've got to go back for another blood test pretty soon to see if it's made any difference, but so far none of it has, and I feel worse than ever, which is really unfortunate. It really sucks. About 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, I started participating in the Pass the Hat initiative, and I was assigned a family as part of that to help with their GoFundMe. My particular family is the Al Masharawi family. They started off with a goal of 19,000 euros just to get their parents out of Gaza, and then once they hit that, they raised that to 220,000 euros in order to get the rest of their family members out of Gaza. There are over 50 of them. The Israeli occupation bombed their family home, which was a 12-apartment building in Gaza, leaving their entire family without a place to live. They also destroyed their store, which is the only source of their livelihood. And I managed to help them for a couple of weeks over on TikTok, and then right as I was doing that, the chronic fatigue really took over, and it's been a real struggle, and I've really felt like I've dropped the ball in helping these guys. So what I really need from you guys, if you can, even if you can't donate, I mean, a donation would be great, even like $1, €1, £1 would be fantastic. But if you can't donate, please share it, spread it. I will leave the link to it in my description. I would also really appreciate it if you could do that with any and all GoFundMes related to Palestine. And I know that this has been going on for so long. I know that it gets very easy to sort of tune it out because there's so many, and it's very hard. I know, as somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, it's very difficult to pick which one to give money to, or to feel like you don't want to pick one over the others, so you just don't. And I'm telling you right now, even if you give $5 to one person, it's going to help. It feels really awful. It feels like there's not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel in regards to this, but the best that we can do is put our money where our mouth is, put our actions where our mouth is, do the best we can, keep going to protests, keep speaking up for Palestine, keep retweeting, reblogging, posting TikToks. It's all incredibly important, and it all means a lot to these people who are stuck in a situation that they have no control over. I will leave a link to a collection of GoFundMes in the description if you want multiple to donate to or multiple to spread around. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, take care of the people who love you, hold on to that. But that is why this video has taken so long. I hope that you liked it. I hope that it's not too serious after the psych video, because I understand that, like, that is why a lot of you newbies are here. Hi! It's so nice to see you. I was genuinely blown away by the reception to my psych video. I'm so happy about that. I am slightly anxious that it means that a bunch of people have shown up who think that all the stuff that I do is just going to be like silly TV retrospectives. It's not. I might do like a silly TV retrospective like once a year, maybe. I think that's probably like a good goal to shoot for, maybe once every 2 years. Maybe if I hit a certain Patreon goal, I might do the next one. That might be how that works. But seriously, it really means a lot to me, especially considering that, like, obviously I'm like quitting my job so that I can go spend a couple months in Australia with my mom, and I'm kind of hoping to use YouTube to help me while I'm out there, which is a big fucking risk, holy shit. And the fact that the psych video did so well has really, like, helped me feel comfortable doing that and feel confident doing that, so really thank you. It would be awesome if I could turn this into an actual job, can you imagine? But I have a whole bunch of videos left in this series about stupidity and about learning and about ignorance. I've got 5 or 6 written down to go. Obviously there's the media literacy one as well, which I'm hoping to release around the same time as Zoe B, so obviously I'll promote that. I'll promote Zoe's video. Everybody should go watch all of Zoe's videos anyway. I'll have a lot of stuff in the chamber, so I'm hoping that I'll do a lot of writing while I'm out there, and like maybe do some filming. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Try to learn something new. Give it a good college try. Annyeong! I'd like to give an extremely special shout out to my patrons. It's still so crazy to me that people want to support my content. It's what's pushed me to actually finish this video despite how really difficult it's been. Extra special shout out to Ian Musso, who signed up to my Roman Empire tier, which is completely insane. I didn't think anybody would do that. I've still got to chat to him about what exactly they want as their video that I will dedicate to them entirely, but before I even do that, huge, massive, extra special, huge shout out to Ian Musa, you fucking legend. Additional thank yous go to my rooftop dwellers, Cast, Dana Brand, Nick Hook, BPs, Ace of Lights, Calcale, Best Stressed, Sunshine Shay, Deborah Laban, Sarah Parker Shemilt, Ghost Porcupine, Callum McLeod of Clan McLeod, Whoop Whoops, Lilac Rose, CS, Rihanna, Carolina, and Chris K. You'll see along the screen my introvert patrons are also scrolling past. What a bunch of absolute legends these people are. Truly, I know I've really dropped the ball on everything lately, but I feel especially bad about dropping the ball on my Patreon, and I will be working extra hard to thank these people for their support. I have a couple of little videos in the works just for Patreon, so if you're interested in those kinds of things, just me talking about TV shows, that kind of thing, please feel free to sign up. If you do not have the money, absolutely I would rather you gave it to Palestinian GoFundMes, you know, like it's very important to me that money goes where it needs to go, and like I'm not well off, but I'm okay, like I'm doing fine, I'm alive, I have a place to stay, it's fine. So A massive, massive thank you to these people, and I really hope that this video is worth the wait.